for this particular sweater, we just need to take a couple of measurements. You'll need to measure the distance across your back from shoulder to shoulder. You'll need to get a bust measurement. You'll need to get the depth from the top of your shoulder to your armpit. That will give you your armhole opening. And then a measurement for as long as you want your sweater to be. Now, if you want your sweater to fall above your hips, then you don't really need to get a hip measurement. I like this sweater a little longer, so I want it to land just past my hips. So I am going to measure down from the top of my shoulder to the point that I want my sweater to land. So I'll show you how to take your measurements, and I will also include a link below to the Craft Yarn Council where they show you in detail how to take all of your measurements for any garment you might like to make. So to measure your upper back, you're going to take your tape measure and bring it around your back. It's easiest to do this in front of a mirror. I'm going to be looking into my viewfinder here to help me out. And make sure your thumb is on the 0. And then across the other side, make sure that your tape measure is straight across your back. Okay, and mine is measuring right at 18 inches across. Now, you can also, if that's difficult for you to reach around, take your tape measure, finger at 0 again, place it in the center of your chest and bring it out to your edge of your shoulder, okay? And mine is measuring right at 9 inches, so that doubled is 18, which is the distance across my back. Then you're going to measure the bust area, taking your tape measure, measuring across the fullest part, and I measure at 37. And then I'm going to measure my hips because I do want my sweater to come down to my hip level. And I am at 40 inches there, okay? I'm going to measure from the top of my shoulder down to the level that I want my sweater to fall. I think right around 23 inches is good for me. And I know you can't see this in my video here, but it does fall right at the fullest part of my hips. That's why that measurement was important at 40 inches, because I want to make sure that my sweater will be at least 40 inches wide or around, so that it's not too tight across my hips. Okay, so once you have taken your measurements, it's important that you record them. I like to put my information on any of my crochet projects into a little notebook like this. That way I can always look back to see what exactly I did to make any particular project. So this particular sweater I'm calling the Beach View sweater for now. I might change it later. I'll write down, for example, the type of yarn that I used. This was Karen Cotton Cakes in the color Beach View. It's a number 4 yarn. It's 60% cotton, 40% acrylic, 8.8 ounces or 250 gram cake, 530 yards and 485 meters. I used a 7mm hook. That's super important to make note of that, because I can't tell you how many projects I have set aside and then I wasn't able to remember the hook size I used, and that's not fun. Okay, so now I'm going to be jotting down my measurements. I said my bust was 37 inches, across my back was 18 inches, armhole depth I did not measure with you, but the hip measurement was 40 inches. So once you've written down your measurements, we're going to use these numbers to help us in creating our panel for our sweater. This particular sweater is constructed with just 2 panels. This is a very simple design, and I think it's perfect for anyone who is new to crochet. So our sweater is going to be constructed of a front and back panel. We need to take these numbers now and apply them to our panels that we're going to make. The circumference of my hips was 40 inches, so that means I need to divide that number by 2, and each panel needs to be at least 20 inches wide. Before we get started with creating our chain, I want to talk to you a little bit first about color controlling. If you're going to be using a yarn that is variegated like this, it might be important to you that your front and back panels match up. So doing that might be a little bit of a challenge, but I'm going to share with you how I'm working on this sweater so that my stripes should match up on the front and back panels. When you purchase your yarn, try to find two that are very similar. In other words, that they start with the same color and end with the same color on the outside. In order to have the best chance of your stripes lining up, it's best to start with whatever color you choose. I like to start with a darker color. And wherever the color changes, for example, on here, we would look for the color change between the cream and the blue. And right where the yarn changes colors, we're going to clip it. And we would do that when we start the second skein at the same point. Okay, so with the second skein, you're going to look for where the color changes from the cream, for example, to the light blue and cut it there. And that's going to give you the best chance for your stripes to line up exactly the same front and back panel. Okay, so to begin, we need to create our chain. Our chain length will be as long as we want our sweater to be wide. So my sweater, I want to be 20 inches wide, so I need to create a chain that is 20 inches wide. So to create a chain, we're going to make a slip knot, place it on our hook. Yarn over and pull your yarn through the loop that's on your hook. Okay, that's one chain. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'm going to keep going, making my chain 20 inches long. So once you've created your chain and it measures to the length that you need, go back and count your chains to make sure that you end on an odd number. For this particular pattern to work, you'll need to have an odd number of stitches for your chain, okay? You'll want to make note of how many chains it took to make your length so that when you make your second panel, you'll have that number for that second panel. So I chained 73, and that gave me my 20 inches. Now that we've created our chain, we're going to start our row 1. Row 1 will be half double crochets across the length of our chain. To make a half double crochet, we're going to go into our third chain from our hook. 1, 2, 3. You can choose to place your first stitch into the front of your chain, or if you turn your chain over, you'll see you have these little bumps. I prefer placing my stitches into the back bump because I think it gives you a nicer finished edge. So I'll be placing my first half double crochet into the third chain from my hook. 1, 2, 3, turning my work over. To make a half double crochet, you're going to yarn over and place your hook into that third chain. Yarn over, pull through, and you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through those 3 loops. Now I want to place a stitch marker here into my first stitch so that when I come back, I'll know where to end my work. I'll show you again how to do your half double crochet. You'll yarn over, place your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull your yarn through that loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. The next half double crochet, yarn over, place your hook into the next chain, grab the yarn, pull it through your chain. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, into your chain, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through those 3 loops, okay? So half double crochets all the way across your chain until you get to the very end, and I will meet you there. All right, so we're coming up to our last chain space. We're going to place our last half double crochet. We'll chain 1 and turn our work. Row 2 is going to be placing single crochets into each stitch across our work here. So our first space is here where you see the V at the top of your work. Okay, not this one. This one is our chain, but this V is our first stitch. We're going to place a single crochet into it. A single crochet is putting your hook into that stitch, so you have 2 pieces of your V, grabbing the yarn and pulling it through. You have 2 loops on your hook. You're going to grab the yarn and pull it through. Now I want to make sure to mark that first stitch, and we're just going to continue this all the way to the end. Place your hook into that next stitch. You'll have 2 bars from a V. Pull the yarn through, 2 loops are on your hook, yarn over and pull that yarn through those 2 loops. Into the next stitch, pull your yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops on your hook. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and continue with single crochets all the way to the end, and I will meet you there. Okay, so we've come to our last stitch. We're going to remove the stitch marker and place our final single crochet into that stitch. Okay, we'll chain 1 and turn. Now this next row we're going to be making double crochets across. Usually when you do a double crochet you'll chain 2 or 3 and then begin your work. I find though that that chain sometimes can be a little too flimsy for the edge of my work, and it's a lot thinner of a stitch than the rest of your double crochets. So I'm going to show you something that I like to do. You don't have to do this, but it's something that I picked up and I like to do it. It's called a stacked single crochet, and that's going to count as a double crochet for this row. So what you'll do is you'll make a single crochet into the first space, and then you're going to make another single crochet right on top of this. The way you do it is you'll take your hook and place it into this first bar of your single crochet. Pull that through so that you have 2 loops on your hook, and you're just going to yarn over and pull through like you've made another single crochet. So it's technically 2 single crochets on top of each other. Okay, so now I do want to mark this. And this will count as my first double crochet of row 3. Now I'll chain 1. I'm going to skip a space, and into the next space I'm going to place a double crochet. A double crochet, you yarn over, place your hook into the stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through, and you have 3 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops. That leaves you with 2 loops on your hook. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through those 2. Okay, that's a double crochet. I'm going to chain 1, skip 1, and into the next I'll place another double crochet. Yarn over, put my hook into the next space, grab that yarn, pull it through. I have 3 loops on my hook, 1, 2, 3. Yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops. I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through those second 2 loops. Chain 1, skip 1, into the next stitch I'll place another double crochet, yarn over, place my hook into my work, grab the yarn, pull it through, 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through the first 2, 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through the second 2, chain 1, skip 1 into the next stitch, a double crochet. Okay, so that is row 3. Okay, so we'll continue this all the way down until we reach our stitch marker, and I will get back with you there. All right, I'm coming up to my last double crochet. Chain 1, double crochet into that last space. For our next row, row 4, we're just going to be placing single crochets into our work all the way back. You'll place your first single crochet right here at the top of this double crochet. Mark my first stitch always with a stitch marker. Into the chain space, we'll place a single crochet. The top of the next stitch, our double crochet, we'll place a single crochet. And then 1 into the chain space. Top of the double crochet. And into the chain space. All right, so I'm placing my last few single crochets here in row 4. Now I want to show you how to end this row 4 off. It can get a little tricky if you don't put a stitch marker here in the row 3. Because placing this last stitch is what's going to help you keep your sides as straight as they can be. So when we started row 3, we went ahead and put a stitch marker here at the top of our stacked single crochets, right? That's where our last stitch for row 4 is going to go. Our last single crochet is going to go right here into the top of that stitch, okay? And we'll put that single crochet there. So we'll chain 2, 1, 2, and turn our work, and then do our half double crochet rows, okay, into that first space with a half double crochet. Mark your first stitch of this row and continue with your half double crochets all the way across. Okay, so we're just repeating what we've done so far in this sweater pattern. This is what we call a 4-row repeat because we're taking the same stitches, the same 4 rows, and repeating them until we get our sweater to the length that we want. We started with our half double crochet row, single crochet row, we did a double crochet, chain 1, skip 1 row, single crochet row, and now we're on our half double crochet row. I'll go ahead and type up the pattern in the description below for you to follow, and I'll also put it on the screen here that you can either screenshot or just pause the video on this screen so that you keep track of your rows. So I'm going to continue on with my sweater until it is 23 inches long, and you go ahead and continue your sweater to your desired length, and we will get back together and I'll show you how we're going to seam our sweaters. So as you're working on your second panel, if you find that your colors start to change somewhere that you're not happy with the way they're flowing, for example, here my color is changing from the lighter blue to the darker blue in the middle of my panel, and I would prefer to have my stripes be complete all the way across. I'll show you what you can do. So what I'm going to do is take out the stitches leading up to that color change. Then I'll bring in yarn from my first cake. This is what was left over from my first panel. And I'll find a place in the cake that matches the color that I'm on. I'll go ahead and begin a stitch. This is my double crochet row, so I'll do the first half of it. I've got 2 loops that are on my hook. And now I'm going to bring in the new yarn to finish that stitch. Okay, so I'm just going to yarn over and pull through like I would finish my double crochet. Now I'll go ahead and cut the original yarn, and I'm going to take my ends and I'm going to tie a knot with my ends. Okay, let me move this other one out from underneath here so you might see better. So I've got my tails, and I'm going to tie a knot right over left, left over right. So these will be at the back of my work, and I can go ahead and sew those in when I'm done with my sweater. So this, now I've joined the same color yarn so I can continue till I get to the end of my row, and then I can go back to the darker blue. If it's important to you that your seams line up color to color like this, then have your first panel handy and just keep an eye on your rows as you're going. And if you need to do a color change, you can do it either, this happened in the middle of my row, or you can do it on the end so that your seams in your rows will line up all the way around your sweater. If that's important for you, it may not be, and that's absolutely fine too, okay? But this is for those of you who want to make sure that your color rows are consistent and that they don't change in the middle of your work. Okay, so when you have 2 panels complete, we're going to work on seaming them together. We're going to be placing a seam along the top of our sweater, and then up this, whoops, can't see that, then up the sides, leaving a hole for the arm. Now you'll want to place your work with the right sides together, right sides facing. On this particular pattern, you can choose which side you prefer and make that the front of your sweater. This is the actual front of the sweater. I know that because my tail is on my left. When we crochet, if the tail is on the left side as you're looking at it, that's the front of your work. We started here with our chain, and then we started placing our first row along that chain coming back in this direction. So this is the front side of my work. The other side is nice too. It just depends on what texture you prefer. This has more of lines throughout your sweater, and this is a more flat side. So depending on your preference, just make sure that you have the same sides facing together. So for this sweater, I'm going to go ahead and use the true front side as my front. So I have my tail to my left, and I'm going to take my second side, and I want my tail to be on my right because I want my right sides facing. Here's my tail. So this is the back of my work because the tail is on my right. This is the front of my work, so I am placing it right side to right side. So I'm lining up my bottom edge of my work. And what we're going to do is start placing stitch markers if you have them, or you can use clips. I have these sewing clips here that you could use those as well. And you want to start along the side of your work, matching your stitches all the way up. So I have these long tails that are a little bit in the way right now, but I haven't cut them because I'm going to be using those to help with my seaming. So I'm going to leave them attached to the cakes of yarn for now. All right, so I'm going to start by, and I find it easiest if you put your fingers through the big holes of your double crochets and line up your work that way. So don't worry about the holes for your sleeves right now. We'll go ahead and remove our clips once we have everything lined up for the sleeve area. And I'll show you too how to measure for the head opening or the neck of the sweater. So once you have clipped your edges together, let's work on marking the neckline. Having the top edge up, you're going to measure for your neckline. Now, the best way to do it so that this opening that you leave is going to be wide enough that you can pull the sweater over your head is to measure the circumference of your head. So you'll just take your tape measure and you'll measure around your head at about the eyebrow level, okay, or the widest part of your head, because that's what needs to fit through this part of your sweater. For a reference, the average woman's head is about 22 inches around. So if we use the circumference of 22 inches and divide that number by 2, we come up with 11 inches. So what we need to do is leave 11 inches open at the top of our sweater. Measure your sweater from end to end. Mine is at 20 inches. The halfway point is here at 10 inches. Now I need to leave an 11-inch opening. So that means I'm going to go 5.5 inches to either side of my center point and mark it. So 5.5 inches from 10 will be at 4.5. And I'm going to put a clip here. And then I'm going to come from the center point and go out again. And that's going to leave me at 14.5 inches on this side. Okay, so this center point here that I marked will be the opening. I'm going to seam from end in and from this end in. So we will just measure here again to see that I'm at 4.5 inches, just about. I'll bring it in just a little bit. The edge of my clip is 4.5 inches. And then I'll come down on this side and do the same just to double check myself, 4.5. So once you've got your clips in, it's best to count your stitches and have the same number of stitches on either side, and that'll ensure that you're in the center of your work. So I mentioned earlier that I did not cut my yarn from my cake, so I'm going to do that now to cut myself a length of yarn to sew my shoulder in here. So to know that I have enough yarn to sew in, I usually will cut a length that is 3 times the distance that I'm going to sew. So if I'm going to sew along this section here, I need a piece of yarn that is at least 3 times that long. I'll even give myself a little extra here. So to finish off this last stitch, I'm just going to pull my yarn through and pull tight, and that will close off that piece there. And I'm just going to anchor this by tying my 2 tails together. Okay, so the method that I like to use for joining is that I'll take my work and hold it upright so I can have my V's facing me. And I like to join my work by taking my needle and placing it into the inside and the inside stitches of my work here. Okay, so if you notice I have V's lined up here, V's lined up here. I'm going to join the two inside pieces of my V. Okay, the two pieces of my stitches that are touching. So I'll bring my needle into one side and then over to the other. Rather than doing a whip stitch where I bring my needle over and around my work like this, I like to join it by coming into now the next stitch above where my yarn is coming out and the inside of the next side of my sweater right across. Now I'm going to take my needle and place it into the stitch above where I came out and into the corresponding stitch on the other side. Going to the stitch above that one and then the corresponding stitch on the other side. Always just placing your needle through those inside stitches. Okay, the stitch above, go here, and the one across. Stitch above, the one across. Now I'm not going to cut my yarn because I'm going to give this a little try on and see if my opening is too wide. I still have yarn here that I can close it up a little bit if I feel like I want it to be a little tighter. Okay, so now I'm going to come to the other side and I'm going to do the same thing. So for the other side, I'll just take my needle and for the corner, I'm going to go ahead and bring my needle through both bars of my V's just to kind of anchor it a little bit more securely. And just tie myself a little knot here. Oh, I always want to make it too short. Give yourself enough yarn that you'll be able to sew that in. Once we're done, we're going to go back and sew in all of our tails that are throughout our work. Okay, and we'll do the same thing we did on the other side, taking our needle, placing it into the inside stitch and the inside stitch on the corresponding stitch right next to it. Coming up one and across. So to end our stitches, we want this to be pretty secure. So I'm going to place my needle under both bars of my last, this is it. I'm going to place my needle under both bars of my last stitch on either side, and that's just going to help anchor it and secure it a little better. So I'll do that a few times because I really want this to be strong. This is going to take a lot of tension as your sweater goes over your head if you've made it a little tight. Okay, so I'm just going to snug that up. Give myself a little knot here. And while I've got my yarn on my needle still, I'll go ahead and just start to sew in my end. And this is how we're going to take care of the rest of all these tails that are laying around here. You're just going to take your needle and feed it in through a couple of stitches at a time so that you can kind of hide that tail. And you want to make it go around in all kinds of different directions because we don't want it coming undone. So I'm going to come back up this way now, and I'm doing my best to kind of hide it underneath stitches. You want to make sure that your needle doesn't travel through the other side of your work, because if it does, then you'll be able to see your stitches through the other side, the front side of your work. Okay, so do take your time when you're doing this so that your yarn is hidden, but it's really woven in to your work, because you really don't want your sweater, after all this work, to unravel or come undone. Next, I'll show you how to figure out your sleeve opening. Okay, so next we're going to be marking the top from the shoulder down to make our opening for our sleeve. Now, to measure that, remember we're taking our tape measure, placing it to the top of our shoulder to our armpit. And for me, that's right about 6 inches. Now I'm going to add 2 more inches to my measurement because I know that I like an 8-inch opening for my sleeves whenever I make my sweaters. So you'll just have to play around with that for yourself to find what works for you and where it's a comfortable opening for you. So I'm going to put my clip here to tell myself that that is the beginning of my opening, okay? And I'll do the same on the other side. So when we're doing our stitches, we're going to bring them from the bottom up to this point, and that's where we'll stop our stitches. Now, I like in this particular design to leave a little opening. I made this so that it would fit around my hips right at the 40-inch mark, but that's going to cause it to fit right around my hips, right? Not a lot of positive ease there. So what I like to do is leave myself a little opening, okay, so that it has a little slit on the side. So I'm going to start my stitches here at the color change. And I am just going to very carefully place my stitches to the best of my ability to camouflage them, okay? Oh, what am I doing? So you choose what's right for you, what method you prefer for seaming, okay? I'm going to do the same for this particular seam here. I'm going to do the same thing I did for the shoulder seam. So I'm going to join my work. By tying a knot in the end here. And then I'm going to just turn my work up and find corresponding stitches. So just take your time and do it nice and slow so your work is as neat as you can make it. Okay, so we'll just continue on until we get to the armpit, and then you'll go ahead and seam up the other side, leaving yourself your opening, if you choose, up to the armpit. Once you're done with the seaming of the sides, go ahead and try on your sweater to make sure it fits the way you like, because the last thing we're going to do is put a little edging on any of these rough sides here. Okay, so now that we have our sides seamed, we're going to go ahead and place edging around our sleeves. To do this, you're going to want to turn your work with the right side facing you. So we were seaming inside out, now we're going to turn it right side out. You'll need to place a slip knot on your hook. Okay, so I like to start at the seam to the stitch just to the right of my seam. I'm going to place my hook into that space. I'm going to grab my yarn, pull it through the sleeve and then through the loop that's on my hook. You kind of do a little slip stitch there. Now into that same space, we're going to place our first single crochet. So now we want to place single crochets into the stitches all around our sleeve. You want to try to space them out as evenly as you can. The way I do it is I place a single crochet per row, and into my double crochet spaces I place 2 single crochets. So this stitch that we're going into next is a double crochet, and I can separate it into 2 spaces, so I'll put 2 single crochets into that double crochet space. Here's 1 and 2. I'll put 1 into this space another one into this space, another one into this space. And we're just going to try to make them as even as we can all the way around the sleeve. Okay, here's my double crochet space, so I'll put 2 in here. I'll put 1 into the big gap, and then there's also a smaller gap here. In that double crochet, I'll put another one there. Okay, 1 here. These are my tails that I need to weave in later. Okay, so we'll do this all the way around, and I will meet you back at our first stitch. At the first stitch, we're going to slip stitch together and then do another round. Okay, so I've come around now to my seam where I began. I'm going to go to my first stitch, and I'm going to place a slip stitch into my first stitch. I'm going to chain 1, and now I'm going to go around another time, placing single crochets into each stitch all the way around. This round's a whole lot easier because going into our single crochets is a lot easier than all that rough, uneven edge. Now, if you find that your sleeve is ruffling on you, that means you've put too many single crochets in. And if you find that your sleeve has gotten smaller, then you have not put enough in. So you can go back and make adjustments if needed. Okay, so we'll do that to both sleeves, and then I will talk to you about finishing off the neckline and the split at the bottom. All right, so when you come around to the seam where you began, we're just going to end it by slip stitching into that first single crochet. We'll cut it, sorry for the noise here. We'll cut a tail and pull our yarn through, pull it tight, and then we'll go back and sew this tail in later. Okay, so we've got our sleeves complete. Now we're going to go ahead and put a row of slip stitches around the seam here on the neckline. This is going to help so that it will keep this from stretching out. So a slip stitch, we're just going to place our yarn on our hook. Okay, so I want to start in one of the corners. I'll place my hook into a stitch on the corner here, and I'm going to place my slip knot on my hook from the inside. That's going to help keep my tail on the inside of my work. I'm going to pull that loop through, and I'm going to chain here. That's going to bring my yarn to the outside. Now I'm just simply going to place slip stitches all the way around. A slip stitch, again, is just placing your hook inside your stitch, bringing it through, and then through the loop on your hook. Okay, we're going to do this all the way around to help keep our shape and to keep that neckline from stretching out. Okay, so do this all the way around, and when we come back, whoops, almost did a single crochet there. When we come back to our first stitch here, I'll show you how to finish it off nicely so that you don't have a big knot or anything on the outside of your work. Okay, so we're back to the beginning, and I'm going to slip stitch to that first stitch. And I'm going to cut myself a tail. Pull your yarn through, and I'm going to show you how to do an invisible join, it's called. That's going to help your edging here not have any obvious ending. Okay, so we're going to take our needle and place it into not the stitch right above where our yarn's coming out, but this one at the base of this V. Okay, we're skipping a stitch and coming into this one like this. Pull your yarn through, and then we're going to take our needle and bring it back into that stitch that we're coming out of, but angle your needle so that it comes to the back of your work. Okay, so that gives you a nice row of the V's along the top here, and you don't have a knot or any obvious ending. Okay, so now I'm going to just take my needle and start feeding it into my stitches in the back. And I actually have a tail here that I'm going to just bring over, and I'm going to tie a little knot here to kind of secure things, and then I'll weave in those ends. Lots of ends to weave in with crochet. All right, so now let's talk about finishing off our corners if you decided to leave a split end on yours. So we'll place a slip knot on our hook. And place your hook into the corner of your work. We'll yarn over, pull through your work, and then the stitch that's on your hook. We'll go back into there and place a single crochet, and we're going to place single crochets all around, trying to space them out as evenly as possible, just like we did on the upper part of the sweater. When you have a double crochet row, place 2 single crochets where you have, and then you'll place 1 stitch into each row. Okay, now rather than chaining 1 and turning my work, I want my slip stitches so that they're facing out. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off here and then go back and start over again on the other side. Okay, so I'm just cutting off my work, pulling my tail through, and I'm going to come right back to where I began. And I'm going to place my hook into my first single crochet. Lots of tails to deal with. Pulling my yarn through my work and the loop on my hook. You can go ahead and tie these if you want to secure things. And then we'll just do a row of slip stitches into each of your stitches all the way around. stitch. And that just gives it a nicer finished edge. Okay, so to finish off, we're just going to pull our yarn through. I'm going to tie my end to one of these ends that are on here just to knot it. Okay, so that is our finished edge here. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. And the last thing you'll do is go through and sew in all of your ends throughout your sweater. Okay? So that is the finished Beach View sweater. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a like. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider doing that. It doesn't cost you anything and it just helps support the channel. If you have any questions about this tutorial, or anything I can help clarify, please just drop me a message down below and I'll get back with you. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.